Heyo everybody, Haku here with my review of the One Piece anime episode 734. And you know what? I didn't think this one was that bad. And I gave a lot of crap for last week and the week before that, and last week's wasn't like the worst thing ever, but I do think there were a lot of really lazy parts that made it really bad. And I think that this week didn't have as many bad parts. It just didn't. The production quality was a lot better looking. It was a lot smoother than last week. Now I'm going to get into why I think all of this, but before I get into that, I do want to say something that's been bothering me about this. Like, even channels I like, just looking at other people's reviews, I see them like, because I've noticed that, like, if I'm positive about something, of course it just gets more views and more likes, but I'm going to be honest either way. Like, if I think something's bad, if I care about something, I'm going to tell you when it's bad, when I think it's bad, when I have issues with it. But I just see channels out there that are like, they're just, even when something's really bad, they just give it a positive review, and I don't know why I don't, like, everyone's entitled to their opinion, but sometimes it doesn't feel genuine. It feels like they're just doing it for, like, the likes or views or whatever, giving something a positive review that it doesn't deserve. But, yeah, sorry, that was just bothering me. And then when all the comments call them out for being like, oh, you're just sucking up to this. Why are you so positive about this? This was really bad. Then they'll go through and just pick an episode and tear it apart just to say, look, I'm not just pandering for views. I actually do look at this critically. But yeah, and that's no channel in particular, because I see a ton, big channels, small channels, everybody doing stuff like that, and I'm not going to do that. I'm going to be honest with my thoughts, even if my thoughts are completely stupid. Like, even if I think something's bad that everybody thinks is good, and objectively it might actually be good, I'm just a retard. But I'm just going to be honest with you guys is what I'm saying. And honestly, I think that we've had a ton of really terrible episodes lately. But this episode wasn't that. It really wasn't that bad. I enjoyed this episode. I thought that it wasn't a pain to sit through like the Sabo and Burgess episode, or last week's episode, or especially the week before that was horrible with Rebecca and Viola. But this week, it was funner to watch. It was more entertaining. And it had less production mistakes, less like really bad animation and stuff. And I think my hugest pro to this episode, I don't know a good word for that. My biggest thing I liked about this episode was the music. The soundtrack was on point. They did it so well. The soundtrack during the recap was amazing. And they did a recap of the whole arc up until this point. And at first I was like, am I going to like this? Am I going to think it's bad? I ended up really loving the recap. I think that if you wanted to, you could just skip you could skip last week's episode, the week before that. You could skip the Burgess and Sabo episode and just watch this episode and next episode. And you'll probably get everything you needed to know from those episodes in a better form in the recap. Because I think the recap with the final blow between Doflamingo and Luffy, it was so much better. The music was better, and we didn't have 3 minutes of screaming. We didn't have all of the Luffy cut-ins, and it was so much better. It was so good. If the scene last week was like what we got in the recap this week, it would have been a lot better of an episode last week. Last week just had so much unnecessary filler that killed any of the hype and any of the good stuff. And I think with that cut out, it's actually good. It is very good. So I think that this week can't remedy last week, but it did its own thing. So we get a still frame of Rebecca towards the beginning, but it wasn't very bad because it wasn't on screen very long. It was a really short one. And I think that's another big difference between this week and last week. This week, there were a couple still frames that I noticed, but they were all at parts where they were like super short, like less than 2 seconds. and they didn't really take up dialogue or anything. They didn't happen while people were speaking. But last week it was like when people were speaking, there were still frames. It was just a picture for multiple seconds, like 3 to 10, not 10 seconds, but 3 to 6 seconds, like really long still screens. And I think that this week did a lot better with not overdoing the still screens. Also, I did really get the feels with the flashbacks because, I don't know, just seeing them cut together without all the long, badly paced fillery stuff in between was a lot more appealing to watch. And the soundtrack, they used that soundtrack that they used when Luffy got the blood transfusion from Jinbei back at Fishman Island. And I love that scene, and I love that OST, and it really fit well. So I thought that it did really well here. And I'm not saying this episode was perfect by any means, but with what it was working with in the manga, it did really well. Like, the manga had, like, nothing this week, like, for this week's episode, but the episode, I think, made it work. I think it worked way better than last week. Last week, there was a ton of content from the manga to work with, and they just butchered it and made it trash. Man, I feel like I'm being way too hard there. But this week, they had pretty much nothing to work with, and they made a decent episode out of it. Not amazing or anything, but pretty decent. One thing that definitely huge points deducted for, something that was really bad and it really gets on my nerves throughout this entire arc, the citizens are so shitty. Like, nothing they can do, it wouldn't matter what the citizens did from here on out. Like, they are just so annoying. They were asking Yachts who won. I know they were trying to run away from this blast and everything, but like, visibly, it was like such a large scale event. I don't see how they missed it. I don't see how they didn't see it. The citizens are really friggin' bad. Also, as the birdcage was disappearing, they used another really, really good OST in my opinion. And it was just so noticeable in all the different characters, how the animation was so much smoother, and it was just so much smoother than last week, and there were not nearly as many still screens, and they weren't used nearly as long. There were pretty much none this episode, and they were used for really short amounts of time. So this episode, far better than last episode in just straight animation and production. And honestly, the first half of this episode, with me watching it, just flew by. The second half is where the flashbacks, like with the Frankie stuff, the Riku flashbacks were okay, but the Frankie flashbacks and stuff were just, it's where they started to get stale for me, and I was like, okay, we can move on a little bit here. And lastly, I'll cover the biggest complaint I see from people with this episode, where they're like, oh, we got so much of Gyat's just blubbering and crying and whatever, and no, we really didn't. They're like, we got like 2 to 4 minutes of it. We got probably like 20 seconds of it, because they would cut to Gyat's for a short time, but then we would go to somebody else and have their flashbacks and their thoughts and stuff. So I didn't mind that. I didn't think it was that annoying. I would have thought it was annoying if we stuck with it like we stuck with the screaming and stuff last week, but we didn't stick with it. We just would cut to it really quick and then jump away from it and do something more interesting, and then cut back to it like for a couple seconds here and there. So it really wasn't that big a deal, honestly. Like, don't get me wrong, it was pretty stupid because the citizens shouldn't have needed somebody to tell them who won. And at this point, he already said that he was Straw Hat Luffy, so why the hell is anyone still calling him Lucy? I think even in the manga, I thought the whole thing with calling him Lucy was really dumb. But overall, I thought this was a pretty good episode. I mean, it wasn't like good or anything, like really good, but it was enjoyable to watch, and it didn't have nearly the mistakes that we've had in the past few episodes. And the past few episodes were supposed to be big and amazing. They were supposed to be our climax, and we had shitty episodes. So to have something with so little content have less mistakes and be less bad than those is pretty embarrassing, Toei. But honestly, didn't think this was bad. It was as entertaining as you were going to get from this, and I don't know, I didn't mind watching it. The quality was pretty the quality was better than a lot of the weeks we've had in recent memory. It was just that the story itself was pretty hollow. Story didn't have much there, but with a long and a long arc with Dressrosa that tried to have some emotional moments, the anime didn't quite do them justice. The anime really butchered this arc, but the emotional moments were going to come back. We were going to have flashbacks of them at the end because they were scattered throughout this very long arc. And a lot of the scenes they showed in flashbacks were so long ago and hadn't really been seen since then that I can remember. So they were okay. It wasn't as bad as the couple flashbacks we've seen with stuff like in the past few episodes when we had flashbacks that were stuff we had just seen or stuff we'd seen 1,000 times. So honestly, I didn't think it was as bad. Not nearly. So I'll give it a... Last week was a 6.5 because though I complained a lot, it wasn't the worst thing ever. It just had a lot of really bad parts that brought down the really good parts. This week didn't have as many really good parts. It didn't really have any really good parts, but it didn't have any really bad parts either. It was just good. It was just plain One Piece, whatever. So I think I'm going to give it 7.5 blubbering yacht speeches out of 10. 7.5 out of 10 because I did think it was enjoyable and entertaining. So I know that a lot of you might disagree with me, but I'm sure there's a few that may agree as well, and either way, your opinion's just as valid. And sorry, I wasn't really talking about anyone in specific, but sorry if you did dislike my thing at the beginning where I was talking about channels that just seem like they give positive reviews that don't feel genuine. So, yeah, sorry about that, and I hope I did feel genuine because I am. I really did. I really enjoyed watching this one, sincerely, and I really sincerely did not enjoy the past two, or the Sabo and Burgess one. And next week it looks like we're getting another Sabo and Burgess episode, and we've seen that in the promo, so it's not a spoiler. And no spoilers either, but I'm just going to say that it was just really skimmed over in the manga. We didn't see much of it, but it looks like we're going to see a lot more of it in the episode next week. And I personally think that's a good thing. It gives Sabo more stuff to do and lets us see him a bit more. And I think it's something that, I don't know, I didn't quite like that it was skimmed over in the manga, so I like that it might get developed a little more here. Like, honestly, I don't think that Sabo did very much of anything in the manga. People still love him, but I don't think he did very much of anything. So I really like that the anime is giving him a little bit more to do, giving his character a little bit more development. Anyway, guys, like if you did like this, subscribe for more One Piece, Tower of God, The Walking Dead, and a lot more. I do at least 3 videos on each series every week. Comment down there, tell me what you thought of the episode and what you thought of my thoughts. Of course, like I said, perfectly fine if we disagree. Like, I know that I can always just be completely wrong on something. Personally, I liked watching it, and I said that a million times, so I'm sorry for saying it again. Follow on Twitter if you want updates. I tweet out whenever I'm posting a new video or if anything needs to be pushed back. I thank you all so much for watching once again, and I will see you all next time.